My wife believes I'm just a retired Navy captain, a quiet man who loves peace. Tonight, at a gala she herself organized, I saw her in another man's arms. The smile she gave him, tender, vibrant, was something I hadn't seen in a very long time. She thinks her biggest secret is her affair. But she's wrong. The biggest secret comes from the husband she is betraying. So, how does an ambitious woman react when she discovers that the settled husband she looks down on is, in fact, the one holding the power to destroy her entire world? I am Donovan Blackwood. At 45, people know me as a retired Navy captain living a quiet life in La Jolla, San Diego. They see a man in a polo shirt, driving an old pickup truck, with a seemingly perfect marriage to his beautiful, successful wife, Camilla Sterling. They don't know that this settled man is silently running Riptide Strategic Group, a private security empire whose influence creeps into the dark corners the government dares not touch. My modesty is a camouflage, a test I've set for the world, and especially for the woman I chose as my partner. Our house overlooks the Pacific Ocean. It's large enough to be impressive, but discreet enough to avoid unwanted attention. Like my marriage, it was once a masterpiece of harmony, a perfect picture built on love and hope. I still remember how her laughter used to fill these rooms. The evenings we sat on the porch, hand in hand, watching the sunset over the water. This place used to be a home before it became a masterpiece of arrangement, a perfect facade. My wife Camilla, 35, is a rising star in her world. As the Director of Strategic Development at Crestwood Defense Solutions, she is a symbol of ambition and power. I remember how her eyes used to sparkle with pride whenever I came home in my uniform. She loved the strength, the decisiveness of an officer, the man she believed could conquer the world. We were happy once, sharing simple moments filled with laughter by the sea and under the sunset. That was when I felt I was her man, and she was the reason I wanted to come home every day. But when I retired and chose a settled life, the pride in her eyes slowly turned into a well-disguised pity. Her gaze no longer held admiration, only distance. She felt I had abandoned the world of power she was trying to conquer, and now I was just a faint shadow. Her business trips became more frequent. Her late nights were explained away as last-minute meetings. I didn't ask. I didn't question. But as an intelligence officer, I was trained to observe, to gather data from the silence. And the silence between us was growing louder. Everything shattered on a Saturday evening at the annual Defense Industry Gala. It was Camilla's world, a ballroom glittering with evening gowns and expensive suits, the air thick with perfume and false pleasantries. I stood in a quiet corner, a glass of whiskey in hand, silently watching her shine, and then I saw him, Preston Hayes, Vice President of Crestwood, a name I had known for a long time, a man who had been on our watch list for shady dealings in Iraq. He approached Camilla. They laughed together, a laugh that was too intimate. His hand rested on her waist, an undisguised gesture of possession. Camilla didn't push him away. On the contrary, she leaned slightly into him. My heart skipped a beat before quickly steadying itself. Years in the military had taught me to lock down my emotions. I walked towards them. The moment our eyes met, the smile on Camilla's face froze. She looked flustered, quickly redirecting the conversation and subtly removing Preston's hand from her waist. She introduced me perfunctorily, then quickly found an excuse to pull him away, leaving me alone. Her averted gaze said everything. It was no longer a suspicion. It was a confirmation. That night on the drive home, the silence in the car was heavier than any accusation. Camilla didn't explain. I didn't ask for one. When we got home, she said she was tired and went to bed first. I sat in my study, enveloped in darkness, An intelligence officer never acts on emotion. He acts on information. And tonight, I realized I was severely lacking information about my own wife. Doubt is like a crack in bulletproof glass. At a glance, it's nothing, but it has already weakened the entire structure. I didn't break anything, didn't call anyone. Panic is the enemy of clarity. I just sat there, in the dark, letting the memories replay. Her laughter in this house, the pride in her eyes when I wore my uniform, his hand on her waist, her averted gaze. They all became disparate pieces of data, disruptive signals in a system I once considered absolutely secure. I needed to know what I was facing. I needed the truth, and I would get it. My wait wasn't long. It came on a Thursday morning, just a few days after the gala. Camilla walked into the kitchen, impeccably dressed as always. She placed a fleeting kiss on my cheek, her expensive perfume brushing past me like a stranger's. "Donovan, I have a last-minute business trip this weekend," she said, her eyes fixed on the coffee maker, not on me. "A strategy conference in San Francisco." "It's very important." "Is that so?" I replied, turning a page of the newspaper without reading a single word. "Be safe." She didn't notice the difference in my tone. She was too used to my role as the settled husband. She left, leaving her lie lingering in the air. The crack in the bulletproof glass began to spread. I didn't go to the office. I went straight to my study and locked the door, through the GPS tracker on Camilla's car, which I had installed long ago, under the guise of anti-theft security. A clear signal came through. I watched her route on the screen. Her car wasn't heading towards the airport for San Francisco. It was going north, on the coastal highway towards Santa Barbara, a city of luxury resorts, not a place for strategy conferences. I didn't confront her. I just turned off the screen and went down to the kitchen. That night, I sat alone in the cold, dark kitchen, with only the streetlights filtering through the window. Next to me was a glass of whiskey. I didn't drink it, just stared at it. The next morning, my composure had returned. I picked up the phone and called the one person in the world I trusted completely, Grant Sullivan, my former SEAL teammate, and now the chief operating officer of Riptide. He was my right hand, my enforcer, the man who understood me without explanation. My voice was steady, devoid of emotion. "I'm not sure. But if I'm right, I want to know who my wife is with." It only took a few hours. Grant never disappointed. An encrypted file arrived on my computer. It wasn't lengthy reports. It was pictures, high-resolution photos. Brutally clear. Camilla and Preston Hayes checking into a 5-star hotel. The way he placed his hand on her back as they entered the elevator. The way she smiled. A smile I hadn't seen in a long time. A smile that wasn't forced. They had a candlelight dinner, laughing and talking. And then, they entered a room together. That night, the moment of decision arrived. I came home early. The house was empty and cold. In the kitchen, I opened a bottle of fine wine, the kind Camilla loved. I poured 2 glasses, one for me, and another placed on the opposite side of the dining table, where she always Saturday. I raised my glass looking at the other one, at the void she had created. For a single moment, I felt my hand tremble slightly, a fleeting crack in my perfect facade. It was the final acknowledgement of pain before it hardened into something else. Colder, harder, more permanent. I downed my wine, then stood up, leaving her glass on the table like an offering to a dead marriage. I returned to my study. I sent Grant an encrypted command, short and irrevocable. "Activate Operation Ironclad." The order to activate Operation Ironclad was like flipping a switch. The vast, invisible machine of Riptide began to move in silence. The first target, Preston Hayes. Grant and his team did not disappoint. They reopened Preston's entire file, a task naval intelligence had failed at, bound as they were by legal procedures. They had rules to follow. We did not. They started with the name Preston Hayes. A familiar name. His file had been on my desk years ago, related to a contractor scandal in Iraq. Back then, we were the Navy. We needed court orders, irrefutable evidence admissible in court. He got away because we had to play by the rules. But now, we were Riptide, an organization built from top-tier specialists, unbound by bureaucracy or legal limitations. Our rules were different. We didn't need court orders. We created our own evidence. With technology and methods operating in the gray zone, we quickly obtained everything. Within 72 hours, a thick, undeniable dossier was on my desk. Inside was not just evidence of an affair. It was a dirty network of illegal activities, bribes disguised as consulting fees, insider trading conducted through offshore accounts, and the exploitation of relationships with other junior employees. In an encrypted video conference, I asked Grant, what about the Cayman account he used in the Iraq deal? Grant's screen displayed a detailed statement. We have it. The one the Navy could never get a warrant for. He paused, his voice flat. Want to make a move? I stared at the numbers on the screen, each one a stain on his honor. I want him to lose everything, I replied, my voice cold. Just as he took my wife, my honor. But let him think he's winning. Simultaneously, on my order, Riptide's financial division, operating under the guise of a shell international investment fund called Orion Investments, began quietly acquiring Crestwood stock on the open market. Each day, Camilla came home, completely unaware that her settled husband was tightening a noose around the world she and her lover inhabited. She didn't know that every dollar traded on the stock exchange was being orchestrated by the same hand. To her, I was still just a shadow. And a shadow cannot fight back. She was wrong. Crestwood shares were acquired quietly by Orion Investments, in small blocks to avoid market volatility. That was the basic move. But to accelerate the plan, I needed a catalyst. I needed Preston to make a mistake himself. It was time to release a decoy, a small rumor, planted in the right ear of a financial analyst, and it would spread like an underground fire. A corporation from Eastern Europe was planning a hostile takeover of Crestwood. The news was perfectly crafted, vague enough to cause panic but detailed enough to seem credible. As I predicted, Camilla noticed the anomaly first. In a meeting, she presented on the stock fluctuations and the circulating rumor. I could picture the scene, her worried expression, and Preston's smugness as he stood up to reassure everyone. He would see this as an opportunity to prove himself a hero, the company's savior, and he did not disappoint. Preston proposed a defensive strategy. Bring in another strategic external investor to increase domestic shareholding and fight off the takeover. He boasted about his connections, about how he could invite a reliable investment fund. The trap was set by Preston's own hand. The investment fund he gleefully invited after what he considered shrewd negotiations was, in fact, my money, funneled through another shell company, an entity completely separate from Orion Investments. He had personally opened the door and invited me in. While Preston and Camilla were busy with their Save the Company drama, I made the decisive move. I knew Crestwood's chairman of the board, an older man, wanted to sell his entire stake to enjoy his retirement. I arranged a meeting through an intermediary law firm, keeping my identity completely secret. The meeting was quick. Numbers were presented, a handshake. The deal was done, combined with the shares already acquired and the investment Preston had just invited in. I, through my entities, now held 51% of Crestwood. A controlling stake. The game was over, though the other players hadn't realized it yet. Immediately after, as the majority shareholder, I sent an unexpected directive to the board: replace the entire audit committee and place my people in key positions in the Human Resources Department to restructure and enhance operational efficiency. Preston, oblivious, was still celebrating his victory and fending off the Eastern European takeover. He didn't realize the ground beneath his feet had been completely pulled away. The board was set. All the pieces were in place. Now, all that was left was to wait for the perfect stage to declare checkmate. That perfect stage was the Crestwood Annual Gala, an event held at the most luxurious five-star hotel in San Diego. It was a night of honors, a night of promises. For Camilla, it was the night she believed she would reap the rewards of her efforts and sacrifices. Preston had hinted to her that after his success in protecting the company, the position of vice president was well within her reach. I was there, as always, still in a simple light gray suit, a modest presence that no one noticed. I chose a quiet corner, whiskey in hand, observing silently. From a distance, I saw Camilla, stunning in an emerald green evening gown, standing next to Preston. They were the center of attention, the power couple. She caught a glimpse of me, a brief frown appearing and disappearing. Her eyes quickly turned away, as if I were just an insignificant part of the scenery. The ceremony proceeded as scripted. Speeches, awards, fake smiles. And then, the moment everyone was waiting for arrived. The current chairman of the board stepped up to the podium. He thanked everyone, spoke of a long journey, and then he made a surprise announcement. And now, before we conclude, I would like to introduce the new majority shareholder and the next chairman of Crestwood Defense Solutions. A hush fell over the room, followed by whispers. All eyes turned to the stage, waiting. From the wings, I emerged, not in the light gray suit, but in a perfectly tailored dark navy suit that exuded power and absolute control. Every step I took was slow, deliberate. The entire room was silent. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me, trying to place this stranger, but I only looked in one direction, towards Camilla and Preston. The smile on Camilla's face froze, then shattered. Her face turned pale, her eyes wide with disbelief and shock. Beside her, Preston's face drained of all color. The smugness on his face vanished, replaced by utter confusion. I walked onto the stage and took the microphone from the departing chairman. I didn't look at the crowd. I looked straight at them. My voice rang out, slow, clear, and cold as ice. Good evening. My name is Donovan Blackwood, head of the Riptide Group, and from now on, I also represent the majority of shareholders here. No one laughed. No one clapped. There was only a suffocating silence. Camilla was frozen. Preston was stunned. The game had reached its end. Checkmate. I didn't need a loud performance. True power doesn't need to scream. There were no video clips. No presentation slides filled with incriminating numbers. The most effective destruction is silent destruction. I just glanced at Preston, a brief look that said everything. Our eyes met for only a second, and I saw the panic begin to rise in his. Instantly, as if on cue, a man in a suit from Riptide's law firm rose from the front row. He said nothing, simply walked to the podium and placed a thick, neatly bound file directly in front of me. The entire room held its breath. I didn't touch it. I just continued to look at Preston, my voice still steady and emotionless. Mr. Hayes, I said, you know why you're here. I won't rehash what you've done in front of everyone. That would be unprofessional. I paused, letting the silence consume him. But you should take a close look at the appendix in this document. A copy will be sent to the press tomorrow morning, if necessary. Preston stammered, his face flushing, then turning pale. He tried to say something, a protest, a plea, but no sound escaped his throat. His eyes darted to the board members, searching for an ally, for support. But he received nothing but cold stares or averted gazes. They already knew. They had chosen their side. Crestwood's internal security men who had been saluting him just an hour before approached him. They weren't forceful. They just stood there, two tall men in uniform, as one said politely, "Mr. Hayes, this way. Please." No one turned to watch him being escorted from the ballroom like a criminal. His career, his reputation, all of it ended in less than 5 minutes. Not with a bang, but with a deadly whisper. Only when the large doors closed behind him did I look away. My gaze swept across the room, finally landing on Camilla. She stood there, alone, in a sea of people. Her hands trembled, clutching her purse. Her eyes were red, but not a single tear fell. She wasn't crying for Preston. She was crying for herself. For the horrifying realization of her husband's terrible calculation. The husband she had so thoroughly underestimated. She knew she had bet everything on the wrong horse. And now, she had to pay the price. I didn't fire Camilla. That would have been too easy an escape. On the contrary, in the first board meeting under my chairmanship the following week, I approved her appointment to the position of Chief Strategy Officer, a minor promotion, just enough to bind her with her own ambition. Camilla's life became a prison without bars. Her office was relocated next to my chairman's suite. Between us was only a transparent glass wall, designed in the open and transparent style I had requested. From my desk I could see her every move, and she, every time she looked up, had to face my presence. Every morning she had to enter my office to report to me directly. Our meetings were always brief, professional, and cold. I never mentioned anything personal. I didn't scold, didn't criticize, and didn't avoid her. I simply existed, a powerful presence, a constant reminder of her betrayal and her failure. The psychological torture also came from those around her. Colleagues who once envied her now looked at her with a mixture of pity and contempt. They whispered behind her back whenever she walked by, "Poor thing, having to work for the husband she cheated on." Or worse, she made the wrong bet. She got the title, she got the higher salary, but she lost everything that truly mattered: respect, honor, and freedom. She was a songbird in a gilded cage, and I was the one holding the key. At night, we still lived under the same roof, but as two strangers. She slept in the guest room. I slept in ours. We rarely spoke. The silence between us was no longer about distance. It was a punishment. I had taken from her not just her lover and her hidden power. I had taken her very illusion of herself. Every day, she had to face the consequences of her choices in a prison built of glass, ambition, and regret. A year passed. Under my direct leadership, Crestwood Defense Solutions not only stabilized but thrived. I had cut away the rotten branches left by Preston and steered the company in a new, bolder, and more effective direction. Camilla, despite living in her own personal hell, proved to be a brilliant strategist. Perhaps the pain and humiliation drove her to throw herself into her work as the only escape. Her reports were always flawless. Her plans were always sharp. She worked with a frightening professionalism, like a machine devoid of emotion. And then, I decided it was time to end the game. I called her into my office late one afternoon. The setting sun cast long shadows through the glass wall, splitting the room into light and dark. Sit down, Camilla, I said, my tone as even as ever. Neither familiar nor distant. She sat, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap, waiting. On my desk was a senior personnel transfer order. I pushed it towards her. Crestwood is expanding. We're establishing a European headquarters, based in London. She glanced at the document, then looked up at me, her eyes questioning. The position of European Managing Director is open, I said directly. And the board has agreed with my recommendation that you are the most suitable candidate. It was an incredible career opportunity. A leap she had once dreamed of. But she was smart enough to understand the true meaning behind it. She gave a small, humorless smile. Is this a pardon or an exile? It's a choice, I replied, my voice unchanged. You can continue to work in that office like a ghost, or you can leave, go to London, and have a fresh start. I won't make your choices for you anymore. She was silent for a long moment, her eyes gazing out the window at the city lights coming on. Finally, she nodded. I accept. 2 weeks later, Camilla was at the airport with her suitcase, ready for a one-way flight to London. A new chapter, a new life, an honorable exile. She had gotten the career she wanted, but at a devastating cost. At the same time, back in the chairman's office, Grant Sullivan walked in. He said nothing, just placed a thin file on my desk. We detected an internal leak of Riptide personnel data to a third party, Grant reported, his voice flat. The source was traced to London. I showed no surprise. I just looked out the window at the planes taking off into the sky and nodded slightly. Yeah, a perfect ending wouldn't be real. I had won. I had executed my own justice. But that victory had cost me what was left of my trust. The war was over, but the vigilance never ends.